The bank alert on my phone lasted only a few seconds, but it changed the way I looked at my marriage forever. My name is Ethan Williams, and for nearly 2 decades, I believed I understood the life I had built with my wife, Olivia. We were not a perfect couple, but we had created something that many people spend years hoping for. We had a comfortable home in Texas, shared responsibilities, and a future we had planned together. Our joint account represented more than just money. It represented years of hard work, sacrifices, and the trust we had placed in each other. I owned a small home service company, and most days were filled with managing projects, meeting customers, and making sure everything continued moving forward. Olivia worked in financial management, and she was always the person who reminded me to think ahead. She was organized, careful, and someone who believed preparation could prevent problems before they happened. That was one of the reasons I respected her. I thought we balanced each other perfectly. I focused on building stability, and she focused on making sure we were prepared for the future. Looking back now, I realize the warning signs were there, but they were so small that I never considered them serious. Olivia had started asking more questions about our savings and financial plans. She wanted to know more details about our accounts, our future goals, and how we would handle unexpected situations. At the time, I thought she was simply being responsible. After all, planning ahead was something she had always valued. I never imagined those conversations would become connected to something that would shake my confidence in our relationship. The moment everything changed happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was sitting in my office reviewing business expenses when my phone showed a notification from our bank. At first, I almost ignored it. Financial alerts were common, and I assumed it was just another routine update. But something made me open the message. When I looked at the account activity, I noticed transactions that I did not recognize. There were attempts to move money from our shared savings, and I had not been part of that decision. I stared at the screen, trying to understand what I was seeing. My first emotion was not anger. It was confusion. I kept searching for another explanation because I did not want to believe that Olivia had made a major financial decision without talking to me. This was the person I had shared 18 years of my life with. The person I trusted with my dreams, my struggles, and my future. The hardest part was not the money itself. The hardest part was realizing that my wife might have been preparing for something without including me. I knew I needed answers, but I also knew that reacting emotionally would not solve anything. I did not want to make assumptions before understanding the full story. So I decided to take a step back and look at the situation carefully. I needed to know what had happened, why Olivia felt she needed to do it, and whether this was only about finances or a sign of a deeper problem between us. Because deep down, I knew the bank account was only showing the surface of something much bigger. After seeing the unusual activity connected to our savings account, I spent the next few days trying to understand what had changed between Olivia and me. The hardest part was not looking at the numbers on the screen. The hardest part was accepting that my wife had made plans involving both of us without first having a conversation with me. I kept asking myself the same questions. When did we stop sharing everything? How long had Olivia been feeling this way? And why did she believe handling this alone was the right choice? I knew I needed answers, but I also knew that making quick assumptions could damage something that had taken 18 years to build. So instead of immediately confronting Olivia, I decided to look back at the months before the bank notification. I wanted to understand whether there were signs I had missed. When I thought carefully about our recent conversations, I started noticing small changes. Olivia had become more focused on financial independence. She asked more detailed questions about our savings, our future plans, and what would happen if life suddenly became uncertain. She talked about making sure she had options and being prepared for situations we could not predict. At the time, I thought those conversations were normal. Olivia had always been someone who liked having a plan. She was the person who organized our schedules, kept track of important documents, and reminded me about things I sometimes overlooked. I respected that quality because it balanced my own personality. I was usually focused on solving problems as they appeared, while Olivia preferred to prepare before problems happened. But after discovering the financial activity, those conversations started to feel different. I wondered if she had been trying to tell me something without directly saying it. That thought was difficult because I had always believed we were partners. I believed that if one of us had a concern, we would bring it to the other person. We had always talked about major decisions before making them. At least, that was what I thought. As I reviewed the information more carefully, I realized Olivia had not made this decision randomly. There had been planning behind it. She had considered steps, thought about possibilities, and prepared for a situation that I did not know existed. That discovery hurt because it meant this was not simply a misunderstanding. However, I also reminded myself that understanding a situation required more than looking at my own feelings. I needed to understand Olivia's perspective too. She was not someone who acted without thinking. There had to be a reason she felt this was necessary. That did not mean I agreed with keeping me out of the decision, but it meant I wanted to know what was happening in her mind before deciding what it meant for our marriage. During those quiet days, I also started reflecting on my own role. I wondered if I had been too focused on work and responsibilities. I wondered if I had assumed that providing stability was enough to show Olivia that I cared. Maybe I had been so focused on building a secure future that I missed something happening in the present. Those questions were uncomfortable, but they were important. A marriage is created by two people, and problems rarely appear overnight. They usually grow through small moments that are ignored or conversations that never happen. I still did not know the full truth behind Olivia's actions. But I knew one thing. Before I could decide what our future looked like, I needed to understand what had caused her to believe she had to prepare for a future without me. The more I looked into the situation, the more I realized that the bank activity was only a small piece of a much larger story. I spent another evening sitting at my desk, reviewing everything carefully and trying to understand what Olivia had been planning. I was not looking for a reason to blame her. I was looking for a reason to understand her. After 18 years together, I knew there had to be more behind her actions than a simple decision about money. I started by reviewing our recent financial conversations and comparing them with what I already knew. I noticed that Olivia had been preparing for changes long before I saw the notification. She had asked about account details, future expenses, and how we would handle unexpected challenges. At the time, I answered those questions without concern because I believed we were simply being responsible adults planning for the future. I never imagined she was thinking about creating a separate financial path. The discovery forced me to look at our marriage from a different perspective. I began remembering moments when Olivia seemed distant or unusually quiet. There were times when she would bring up concerns about security and independence, but I would respond by telling her that we were doing fine. I thought reassuring her was enough. I thought showing her that we had savings, a home, and a stable life would remove those worries. But maybe I had been listening only to the words and not the emotions behind them. That realization was difficult to accept. I had always considered myself a responsible husband. I worked hard, paid attention to our future, and tried to create a comfortable life for us. But responsibility is not only about providing financial stability. It is also about making sure the person beside you feels included and understood. While I was trying to understand Olivia, I also needed to protect myself. I did not want to make a decision based on fear or frustration. I wanted to make sure our finances were secure while I searched for the truth. I carefully organized our financial information, reviewed our shared plans, and made sure I understood exactly what had happened. My goal was not to punish Olivia. My goal was to prevent a bigger problem while leaving room for an honest conversation. As I continued looking through the details, I found something that surprised me. Olivia had not acted randomly. There was a pattern behind her choices, and it suggested she had been preparing for a specific concern. That discovery made me realize there was a story I did not know. For the first time, I started wondering if Olivia had been carrying a fear that she never felt comfortable sharing with me. That possibility changed the way I looked at everything. I was still hurt that she had made important decisions without involving me, but I also understood that people usually do not take major steps unless they believe there is a reason. The question was no longer only about what Olivia had done. The bigger question was why she felt she needed to do it in the first place. I knew the only way forward was to have the conversation we had been avoiding for too long. But before I sat down with Olivia, I needed to prepare myself for whatever truth was waiting. Because I was beginning to understand that this was not just a financial problem. It was a problem that had been quietly growing between two people who once promised to face everything together. I waited several days before I finally decided it was time to talk to Olivia. During that time, I thought about every possible way the conversation could go. I knew I could walk into the room with frustration and accusations, but I also knew that would not help me understand what was really happening. After 18 years of marriage, I did not want our first serious conversation about this issue to become a battle. I wanted answers, but I also wanted honesty. That evening, after we finished dinner, I asked Olivia if we could sit down and talk privately. She immediately noticed that something was different. Her expression changed, and I could tell she knew this conversation was connected to the financial activity I had discovered. We sat at the kitchen table where we had shared thousands of ordinary moments over the years. It was the same place where we had planned vacations, discussed family decisions, and talked about our future. But that night, the atmosphere felt completely different. I calmly explained what I had seen and asked her to help me understand. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse her of trying to hurt me. I simply told her that I felt confused and disappointed because a decision involving both of us had been made without my knowledge. For a few moments, Olivia stayed quiet. I could see that she was choosing her words carefully. Then she admitted that she had been preparing for a possibility that had been worrying her for a long time. She explained that she had started thinking about financial independence because she felt uncertain about what would happen if life changed unexpectedly. Hearing that surprised me because I had always believed we were working toward the same future. I asked her why she never told me about those fears. Her answer was difficult to hear. Olivia said she felt like I was always focused on solving problems after they appeared, while she wanted to prepare for every possible situation before it happened. She said she did not know how to bring up those concerns without making me feel like I had failed her. That moment made me realize something important. We had both been making assumptions about each other. I assumed Olivia felt secure because we had a stable home, savings, and a plan. Olivia assumed I would not understand her worries because I approached problems differently than she did. Neither of us had been trying to create distance, but our lack of communication had created it anyway. I still struggled with the fact that she had made financial decisions without including me. Trust is built through honesty, and I believed important choices should be shared between partners. But at the same time, I began to understand that Olivia was not acting out of anger or a desire to harm our relationship. She was acting from fear. That did not erase the problem, but it changed the way I viewed the situation. For the first time since discovering the account activity, I stopped seeing only the action and started seeing the emotion behind it. I realized that protecting my future was important, but understanding my wife was important too. That conversation did not solve everything in one night. There were still questions we needed to answer and trust we needed to rebuild. But it was the first honest conversation we had shared in a long time. And as difficult as it was, it showed me that the biggest problem between us was never just about money. It was about two people who had stopped talking about what they truly needed from each other. After our conversation that night, I realized something had changed between Olivia and me. The problem was still there, and the trust we had built over 18 years had been shaken, but for the first time in a while, we were actually talking about the things that mattered. We were no longer avoiding difficult subjects or pretending everything was fine. We were finally looking at the issues that had been quietly affecting our marriage. In the days that followed, Olivia and I continued having conversations about our finances, our expectations, and the fears we had both been carrying. I learned that Olivia had been feeling uncertain about the future for longer than I realized. She was not worried because we were struggling financially. In fact, she knew we were in a stable position. Her concern came from feeling like she needed a stronger sense of control over her own security. She explained that working in financial management made her constantly think about risks and possibilities. She spent her days helping companies prepare for unexpected situations, and over time, that mindset started affecting how she viewed our personal life. I understood that because everyone has moments when their professional experiences influence the way they see the world. At the same time, I explained my own perspective. I told Olivia that the hardest part for me was not the idea of planning for the future. The hardest part was feeling like she had created a plan that did not include me. I wanted to be her partner, not someone who found out about important decisions afterward. That conversation helped both of us recognize where we had fallen short. Olivia admitted that she should have talked to me before making financial moves. She realized that trying to protect herself had unintentionally created more uncertainty between us. I also admitted that I had not paid enough attention to the emotional side of our relationship. I had spent years believing that working hard and providing stability was the best way to show love. But Olivia helped me understand that being present and listening were just as important. A few weeks earlier, I would have looked at the situation only from my own perspective. I would have seen the account activity as proof that my trust had been broken and stopped there. But after hearing Olivia explain her fears, I realized the situation was more complicated. Both of us had made mistakes. Both of us had allowed assumptions to replace conversations. The difference was that now we had a chance to fix it. We decided to create new habits together. We reviewed our financial plans as a team, discussed future goals openly, and agreed that no major decisions would be made without both of us being involved. It was not about controlling each other. It was about rebuilding the partnership we thought we already had. Still, I knew rebuilding trust would take time. One conversation could not erase the uncertainty that had grown between us. Trust had to be restored through consistent actions and honest communication. Looking back, I realized the financial issue forced us to face something we had been ignoring for years. We had both been focused on building a secure life, but we had forgotten that a secure life also requires two people who feel heard and valued. The money was the reason we finally started talking, but the real work was learning how to understand each other again. After we decided to rebuild our communication, Olivia and I understood that changing our marriage would require more than one honest conversation. We had spent years creating a comfortable life together, but we had also created habits that made it easier to avoid difficult topics. The financial situation had revealed something we both needed to recognize. We were not struggling because we lacked love. We were struggling because we had stopped sharing the thoughts and fears that shaped our decisions. In the weeks after our conversation, I noticed small changes in the way we interacted. Olivia started including me in every financial discussion, not because she had to, but because she wanted me to feel like a true partner again. She would sit with me at the kitchen table, review our plans, and ask for my opinion before making decisions. Those moments may have seemed simple, but they meant a lot because they showed that trust was being rebuilt through actions. I also had changes I needed to make. I realized that I had spent so much time focusing on providing stability that I sometimes overlooked the importance of emotional connection. I thought working hard, paying bills, and planning for retirement were enough to show Olivia that I cared. But I learned that people do not only need security. They also need to feel seen, heard, and understood. One evening, Olivia and I looked through old photos from when we first met. We remembered how excited we were about building a life together. We talked about the dreams we had when we were younger and how much our lives had changed over the years. That conversation reminded me that the person sitting across from me was not someone trying to hurt me. She was someone who had been carrying fears she did not know how to express. At the same time, I was not wrong for feeling hurt. A partnership requires honesty, especially when decisions affect both people. Understanding Olivia's reasons did not mean ignoring what happened. It meant finding a way to move forward without allowing resentment to control our relationship. We created a new approach to managing our finances. Instead of one person handling certain decisions alone, we made plans together. We set aside time each month to discuss our goals, expenses, and concerns. More importantly, we created space for conversations that were not about money at all. We talked about stress, expectations, and the things we sometimes kept to ourselves. Slowly, those conversations became normal again. Looking back, I realized the hardest part of that experience was not protecting our savings. The hardest part was realizing that two people who loved each other could still become disconnected if they stopped communicating. The situation forced us to pay attention to something we had ignored for too long. We had been protecting our future financially while forgetting to protect our relationship emotionally. I still remember the uncertainty I felt when I first saw that bank notification. At that moment, I thought I was facing a financial crisis. I thought I was discovering a problem with money. But what I eventually discovered was something much deeper. I discovered that a strong marriage is not built by avoiding difficult moments. It is built by facing them together. Olivia and I did not become stronger because we never faced challenges. We became stronger because we learned how to handle them as a team. And that lesson changed the way I looked at trust, partnership, and the future we were still building together. As time passed after the difficult conversations Olivia and I had, I began to notice that rebuilding trust was not about one big moment. It was about hundreds of small choices we made every day. At first, I thought the hardest part would be moving past the financial situation itself. I thought the numbers, the decisions, and the uncertainty would be the things that stayed in my mind the longest. But I eventually realized the real challenge was learning how to feel secure with each other again. Trust had been shaken, and even though we both wanted to move forward, we understood that rebuilding it required patience. There were moments when old feelings returned. I would remember the day I saw the bank notification, and I would feel that same confusion I felt in the beginning. But instead of keeping those thoughts to myself, I started talking about them with Olivia. That was something I had not always done before. I used to believe that bringing up uncomfortable feelings would create more problems, but I learned that silence often creates more distance than honesty does. Olivia also became more open about her thoughts. She explained that her fears were not because she wanted to leave our life together or because she stopped believing in our marriage. She had been worried about uncertainty and felt like she needed to create a sense of control. Hearing that helped me understand the difference between someone making a mistake and someone trying to hurt you. I still believed the decision should have been handled differently, but I no longer saw Olivia's actions through only one perspective. I saw a person who had been afraid and had chosen the wrong way to express that fear. That realization changed the way we approached disagreements. Before everything happened, we often focused on finding solutions quickly. If there was a problem, I wanted to fix it immediately. Olivia wanted to analyze every possible outcome. Those differences had always been part of who we were, but we had allowed those differences to create distance instead of balance. We started learning how to use those differences to support each other. When financial decisions came up, we discussed them together. When personal concerns appeared, we made time to talk about them instead of assuming the other person would understand. It sounds simple, but for us, it was a major change. We were no longer trying to protect ourselves from each other. We were trying to protect the relationship we had built together. One of the biggest lessons I learned was that love does not automatically create understanding. Even people who care deeply about each other can misunderstand each other when they stop communicating. Olivia and I had spent years building a home, managing responsibilities, and planning for the future, but we had forgotten that our relationship needed attention too. The experience changed how I viewed partnership. I used to think being a good husband meant carrying responsibility and making sure everything was stable. Now I understand that being a good partner also means creating a space where both people can be honest about their worries. Looking back, I know the situation could have easily pushed us further apart. It could have become a story about blame and resentment. Instead, it became a turning point. We had to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves, but we also discovered that our marriage was stronger when we chose communication over assumptions. The problem that first brought fear into our home eventually became the reason we learned how to listen to each other again. Months after that difficult chapter in our marriage, I started noticing something that surprised me. The biggest changes were not the ones people could see from the outside. There was no single moment when everything suddenly became perfect again. There was no simple conversation that erased every doubt we had experienced. Instead, the changes happened slowly through everyday choices that showed we were both committed to becoming better partners. Olivia and I began creating a new routine around our relationship. We made time to talk about things that had nothing to do with bills, schedules, or responsibilities. We talked about our goals, our worries, and even the small things we used to keep to ourselves. I realized that those ordinary conversations were actually the foundation of trust. Before everything happened, I thought a strong marriage was mostly about being dependable. I believed that if I worked hard, provided stability, and handled my responsibilities, I was doing everything necessary. But I learned that emotional presence matters just as much. A person can have a secure home and a planned future, but still feel alone if they do not feel heard. Olivia helped me understand that lesson. She showed me that her concerns were not about rejecting the life we had built. They were about wanting to feel like her voice mattered in decisions that affected both of us. I also shared with her what I had been feeling. I told her that discovering those financial decisions without knowing about them made me question whether we were still working as a team. I did not want to control her choices. I wanted to feel included in the choices that affected our shared life. That difference became one of the most important things we learned. A partnership is not about one person having all the answers. It is about two people bringing their thoughts together and finding a direction they both understand. We also changed the way we handled our finances. Instead of seeing money as a source of stress or disagreement, we treated it as something we could manage together. We reviewed our goals, discussed upcoming expenses, and made plans that reflected both of our priorities. Those conversations gave us something we had lost for a while, confidence in each other. The most meaningful change, however, was not in our financial planning. It was in the way we responded when something felt uncomfortable. Before, one of us might avoid a difficult conversation because we did not want to create tension. Now, we understood that avoiding a conversation did not remove the problem. It only allowed the problem to grow quietly. There were still moments when we disagreed. We were still two different people with different ways of thinking. But disagreements no longer felt like threats to our relationship. They became opportunities to understand each other better. Looking back, I realized that the situation that once made me question our future actually helped us create a stronger foundation. It forced us to admit that love alone is not enough. Love needs communication, honesty, and effort from both people. Olivia and I did not rebuild our marriage by pretending nothing happened. We rebuilt it by acknowledging what happened and choosing to grow from it. The experience changed the way I viewed commitment. Commitment is not only staying together during easy times. It is choosing to understand each other when things become difficult. And that choice is what allowed us to move forward with a stronger relationship than before. Looking back at everything that happened, I realized the moment that changed my marriage was not the day I saw the unexpected activity on our account. That was only the moment when a deeper problem finally became impossible to ignore. The real turning point was when Olivia and I decided to stop protecting ourselves from difficult conversations and start protecting our relationship instead. For a long time, I believed security came from having enough money saved, a stable home, and a clear plan for the future. Those things are important, but I learned that true security also comes from knowing the person beside you feels respected, included, and valued. Olivia and I had spent years building a life together in Texas. We had shared responsibilities, celebrated successes, and supported each other through challenges. But somewhere along the way, we became so focused on managing life that we stopped paying attention to how we were experiencing it together. The financial situation forced us to look at that honestly. It showed us that even a strong relationship can become disconnected when two people stop sharing what is happening inside their minds. I used to think the biggest threat to a marriage was a major disagreement or a difficult circumstance. Now I understand that the bigger danger is silence. Small concerns that are never discussed can slowly become larger problems. Fears that are never expressed can turn into decisions made alone. Olivia and I learned that communication is not only about talking when everything is going well. It is about being willing to speak when something feels uncertain, uncomfortable, or difficult to explain. One of the most important things I learned was that understanding someone does not mean ignoring the impact of their choices. Olivia's concerns were real, but the way she handled them created a problem between us. My feelings were also real, but I had to recognize that I had not always created enough space for her to share those concerns. Both of us had something to learn. Both of us had ways we could improve. That realization changed the way I viewed our marriage. I stopped seeing relationships as something that could only succeed when both people always made the right choices. I started seeing them as something that grows when two people are willing to acknowledge mistakes and make better choices afterward. Today, Olivia and I still plan carefully for our future. We still discuss finances, responsibilities, and important decisions. But now those conversations feel different. They are not about protecting ourselves from each other. They are about working together toward the same goals. We understand that trust is not created by avoiding problems. Trust is created by facing problems honestly and proving through actions that both people are committed. If I could go back to the day I received that bank notification, I would tell my younger self that the situation was not only about what I discovered. It was about what I would learn afterward. I thought I was facing a problem with money, but I was really facing a problem with communication. I thought I needed to protect my savings, but I eventually learned that the most valuable thing to protect was the connection between two people who chose to build a life together. Olivia and I did not come out of that experience with a perfect marriage. We came out with a more honest one. A marriage where difficult conversations are no longer something we avoid, but something we face together. And that lesson is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life.